Thank you so much, everyone. My name is Mike DeSocio, and I'm really excited today to be sharing with you a piece of my Keystone project, which focused on the issue of LGBTQ youth homelessness in Boston. I was advised by Professor Mitch Zuckoff, who is here as well today. The project was a journalistic story, and so to start off, I'm going to read a piece of the story. On the morning of September 28, 2016, Linishte fled a beating in the front seat of her ex-girlfriend's car and made a break for the North Washington Street Bridge, a rusty Charles River crossing that stands in the shadow of the Zakin Bridge and TD Garden. It was 4 a.m. "I'm never going to get out of this. I'm never going to escape," she recalls thinking. Short and slim, her head shaved except for a thin mohawk she often covers with a black baseball cap, Linishte has a lip piercing that sparkles at the edge of her easy smile. She ran toward the bridge on an impulse to end her life. As Linishte began to maneuver herself over the metal railing, her ex-girlfriend caught up. She came to in the passenger seat of a car an hour later. At 22, Linishte struggles daily with depression, anxiety, HIV-positive status, and other health issues. And on top of all of these trials, homelessness. Linishte is the main character of the story that I ended up writing for this project, and I'm going to get a bit more into her story as we go on in the presentation. But to start off, I wanted to go over why in the first place I decided to focus on this topic. So the first reason was that a few years ago, there was a study that came out of the University of California, Los Angeles, that stated 40% of all homeless youth in this country identify as LGBTQ. And that was a huge number that certainly caught my attention and the attention of the national media. And what I came to find out was that that number was actually as high as 25% even here in Boston. And so I knew it was an issue not only with national relevance, but with relevance right here in this city. And the other issue has to do more broadly with the idea of LGBTQ rights. And in 2015, when the Supreme Court victory for equal marriage happened, it gave us sort of a false sense that the fight for LGBTQ rights was over and that the struggles were over. But the reality is, and certainly not just in Boston, but everywhere, the struggles for LGBTQ people very much still exist. And so I wanted to shine a spotlight on one of those struggles, which in this case was youth homelessness. So why journalism? As many of you know, I'm a journalism major, but that's not the only reason why I decided this was a fitting medium to take on this project. I knew I could do something more traditional, perhaps like a research paper, focus some more on existing literature and things like that, but I wanted something a bit more emotional, something that would stick in readers' minds. So to illustrate that, I wanted to show a quick comparison. So this is your brain normally, and this is your brain on storytelling. So this isn't probably a scientifically accurate representation, but there is actually science behind the idea that character-driven stories engage your brain in really unique ways. They enhance your sense of empathy. They allow you to retain key points a lot better than just simple facts and information might. And they also hold our attention longer than other types of information. So journalism, essentially at its core being a truthful and rigorous form of storytelling, I knew that it was the proper way to go about telling the story of this issue. And so the research itself took place over the course of about 10 months. I started that off with background research over the summer and quickly got into the actual reporting of the story. The main character, who I mentioned earlier by her pseudonym Linishte, was someone that I spent many months with, not only experiencing life alongside her, but also documenting it with writing and also photography. And then I also sought out a broader perspective. So I talked to experts, social service providers, city officials, other folks experiencing homelessness certainly, to try to get a broader sense of how this issue fit in with the city and with the broader issue of homelessness. And when I was focusing on this demographic of youth, I defined it in sort of two different ways. First, as under 18, which is the kind of the traditional understanding of youth, but also as this range of 18 to 24-year-old young adults who are also facing a lot of struggles in this area, if not a lot of unique struggles. And so Linishte, as a 22-year-old woman, kind of fit into that category as well, and her story was very representative of a lot of this. So the final piece is what you can see up here. It ended up as a 3,000-word written piece in Dig Boston in March that was accompanied by some other photography work. And it was also published as a photo essay in Spare Change News, which is a publication in Boston that focuses mostly on issues of homelessness. So that's sort of the scope of the project and how I did it. What I wanted to focus on now was some of the main takeaways of the project. So the first one that I came to out of my research was that homelessness is not a single condition. And I think it's really easy to think sort of traditionally that you become homeless when there's a mismatch between your financial resources and the affordability of housing, that it's simply a financial issue, and that's the one condition that that person is facing. But really, it's a convergence of factors, and to understand homelessness, you have to sort of understand people in crisis more broadly. And for LGBTQ youth especially, there are some really unique triggers that lead to homelessness that aren't that simple. The main one is being kicked out of a home by parents or family because it is unsafe due to sexual or gender identity, or simply choosing to leave because it is unsafe for those reasons. And a large population of youth who are experiencing homelessness also report physical and sexual abuse in the home. So it's certainly not just a financial situation, and it's convergence of a lot of different things. Those all ring true in the experience of Liniște. She actually left her native country of Romania at a very young age because her mother felt that it would be unsafe for her to live as a gay woman in Romania. And so she rotated through a number of group homes, social service programs, and things like that between the United States and Mexico before finally settling here in Boston a few years ago. And even now here in Boston, her struggles do not simply come down to money. Certainly finances are a factor for her, but there's a lot of other things that are converging to prevent her from finding stable housing, whether that be struggles with mental illness, health issues, struggles with being out in different areas, and the safety issues that she might face due to those concerns. So the convergence of factors that lead to her housing crisis are very much represented in Liniște's story. The second thing that I came away with was that, in her own words, being gay here is harder in a lot of ways. Now, this probably runs counter to our understanding of Boston and New England, certainly as these very liberal places where it is safe to be gay and LGBTQ more broadly. And that's actually the reason that she came to Boston in the first place. She told me that someone told her it was either Boston or Seattle. These were sort of the safe places in the US to be gay, but that's actually unfortunately not the case. A recent report actually in the Boston Globe cited that LGBTQ people are the most frequently reported targets of hateful acts, and that they're actually more likely than any other group to endure assaults, threats, and acts of harassment. So even just recently, as a couple months ago with that report, we know it's not that simple. And that story, again, is represented in Liniște's experience. She's pictured here with her girlfriend, Tay. They have a very beautiful relationship, don't get me wrong, but certainly their relationship does put them at risk in some ways. For one, the shelter system, which is set up to serve homeless folks in general, is very unfit for youth, but certainly for LGBTQ youth. In the past, Liniște has faced sexual harassment in these environments because people feel as though they can take advantage of her or fix her due to her sexuality. And it's also difficult getting access sometimes when she's not someone who presents clearly as male or female, and the whole shelter system is sort of set up on that binary. But even in public spaces, she finds herself at risk, whether it be passive-aggressive incidents or downright aggression, as I just mentioned with that report from the Boston Globe. So being out and being gay in Boston for Liniște really means that there's often no place she can go to feel safe, and it very much runs counter to our traditional understanding of Boston as a liberal place. And the final thing that I came away with from the research is that there's really no silver bullet to addressing homelessness. I think it's really easy to say, we just need more shelters, or we just need to prevent this altogether, but it really can't be thought of as a one-size-fits-all solution. So what I came away with is that there are a few things that need to happen if we hope to address this. And the first thing is to sort of create a broader understanding of people in crisis in the first place. As I mentioned, homelessness is really a convergence of a lot of different things, and the only common denominator is that people end up without housing in a time of crisis. So we need to understand those crises better. We can't just allow shelters to sort of become the housing that you end up with when you're in a crisis. And part of that has to do with education. It's really important to educate communities, families, and schools, certainly in the case of young people, so that they're supported as young people, as LGBTQ people, and that they have those support systems that will prevent them from becoming homeless, hopefully, in the first place. But certainly, regardless, homelessness is going to happen. And so we need to make that situation safer and better for people who are involved. And that means providing better and safer shelters, providing more resources, whether that's job training and otherwise, so that people can get back up their feet more easily. All that to say that we need to consider all of these things when addressing homelessness, and there's really no one policy or no one thing that can kind of sweep in and fix it all. So those are the three main points of my presentation, and I really thank you for all of your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Liniște, that was her pseudonym. Is that
Yeah.
for any particular reason?
Yeah, I mean, certainly when you're dealing with a sensitive story like this, there are a number of issues with being identified, just for personal safety. And so she felt safer to, even though being visually represented, to not have her real name in the story. Yeah, Natasha?
How do you think you were able to gain her trust over the lens?
That's a great question. So people often also ask how we met, and we met very randomly, just sort of like on the sidewalk one day. And I think it was important not to come in saying like, "Hey, I'm doing this 6-month project, want to be a part of it." So, so it was started off really slow. The first thing I did was just a very simple interview, and then worked up to kind of like, "Can I hang out, take some pictures today? Like, do you think we can talk about this more sensitive part of your life today?" And I was actually really grateful that we're really lucky as well that she was super open from the very beginning. So I think that helped. And again, just kind of being persistent, but taking it at the right pace so as not to kind of overstep my boundaries, I think helped a lot. Yeah.
Is there a reason, or what is the reason, I guess, for the higher than national average homeless people being LGBTQ?
I mean, I think a lot of it goes back to some of those triggers I talked about. I mean, I think youth homelessness in general is a phenomenon, is sort of rare, but and if you think about what would be the reasons that as a young person you would be kicked out of your home, be left without a home, and I think those issues of abuse and instability because of your sexual and gender identity are unfortunately really prevalent among those issues. Yeah.
When you were working on this project, did you come into contact with any advocacy or activist organizations working in Boston to try and address this issue? And
Yeah.
also, did you do any research on some of the ongoing legislative proposals being introduced either in the city of Boston or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts more generally?
Yeah, so as far as activism goes, there are definitely a few organizations that I mentioned in the story that are doing great work. One of them is called Y2Y, and they're actually a homeless shelter in Boston run by youth for youth, and is especially a safe haven sort of for LGBTQ people, so that's a really good one. There's a similar program in the same space called Youth on Fire that's not necessarily meeting the needs of homelessness, but is just a really great support system in general for a lot of different things. Legislatively, there's really not a whole lot going on except for fights for more funding to support these kinds of initiatives, and not all of them are publicly funded, but that does help. But otherwise, there's really not a whole lot going on legislatively. Yeah.
I absolutely believe your brain on narrative graphic. It's accurate, and we have a neuroscientist here. I think we can prove it. I'm curious if the response to the 2 publications that you mentioned has been what you wanted. Do you feel like it's ignited a kind of power? And what has the response been from readers?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few different things. So part of what I did actually was after I published this, I went to a few different high schools around the state to kind of like host discussions about this, and brought the initiative with me to them as well. And so that response has been really great, being able to talk to like high school students who very much have the capacity to support their peers. And that the response from that was really great. But as far as the publication itself, I mean, I've still talked to her actually pretty regularly, and she said, "Oh, a lot of people have been saying, oh, we saw this, our communities are talking about this, like, we think this is really important." So I haven't received a whole lot directly, but even just hearing that from her as someone, who's in the community that a lot of people are talking about it now, was very satisfying to me. So, okay, I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so much.